Of course, with the rise of interior designers, we're going to see the rise of designed interiors, which sounds very odd. But what I'm referring to is as we get interior design as a more and more important part of society, we're going to see more designed interiors. And that's going to be key because they play off of each other. As you see more work coming out, you're inspired to hire your own interior designer, thus creating a larger and larger field. So, up until this point, for example, in the Victorian, which is a great period to look at as a basis for sort of the start of the designed interior, what we start with is something that is incredibly eclectic. You would see all sorts of different forms, chairs that don't match, wallpapers and forms that are chosen based on, for example, the owner's own aesthetic taste, which, as we know, isn't always the greatest. Plus, you have multiple aesthetic tastes going on because you have a husband, wife, etc., all involved. And so you're going to get a very busy, very eclectic form, mixing a whole bunch of different periods and styles. Now, the fashion at the time was to create these period homes. You would have a historical home and you would want to decorate it in that form. The downside is that frequently means something that's fairly dark, especially when compared to the new modern and international architectural styles. So, as the style at the top end of the market continues to move to more and more open, light, airy sort of forms, you're going to see that trickle down. And people want to apply that into their older homes. So that's where we get into these designed interiors. What you're going to see is a move towards period style with a modern palette, something that we've seen from some of those decorators that we looked at, such as DeWolf. So here is an example. This could be a very dark space. For example, you could have dark woodwork around the various windows. The beams could be left in their natural state as a dark wood, and it would be intimate, yet not terribly airy space. Instead, by adding a more modern palette using lighter colors and painting things that wouldn't typically have been painted prior, you can lighten up the space, and it juxtaposes with the use of the darker antique furniture to create something that is more livable in the middle of the 20th century. They're also going to be looking at a number of different ideas. So, for example, kitchens and family life become more important. And as that house becomes more important, remember, we've become more suburban, so you're spending more time in the house. You're not in urban environment where you're out all the time. Suddenly, that idea of decor becomes particularly important, that idea of design. You want something mixing these ideas that's both comfortable and intimate, and yet light and airy enough to feel like you're moving through a healthy space, because we don't typically think of small spaces as particularly healthy. So with all of these shifts, where are people being influenced? Well, we've dealt with the magazines, but they're also going to be influenced by this new media called television, as well as by cinema. And what we see are television shows that are going to be set in very modern settings. You see that even today amongst sitcoms and other shows where they always have beautiful design going on. It never looks anything like your house. And movies doing the same thing during that period, giving people ideas about design, giving them ideas and influences that they will bring back, and they'll go to their local department store looking for specific pieces. And of course, we see the rise of catalogs. Now, catalogs had existed up until this point, but they're pushing the idea of decorating in a single style. And this is not something that people have historically done. Just because you live in a specific period, the Victorian, doesn't mean all your decor matches. So they're pushing this idea, and what you would have is the rise of bedroom sets or the rise of dining room suites, where everything is in the same style. You can pick and choose what you want. You might change out the chair, for example, but there's a couple of different tables, and based on that table, you pick a chair. Many of these catalogs had quote-unquote designers on staff, and you could call them and say, hey, I'm picking this piece. What goes well with it? And so we're seeing design moving down, trickling down from the very upper classes into the middle class.